Okay, this is our second attempt at adapting the first season of Avatar The Last Airbender. Let's see where we went wrong. Let's get this out of the way first. It's not worse than the Shyamalan adaptation. I said in a previous video that this adaptation would be akin to a live-action Disney remake. It's going to do a few interesting things, but nothing too outside the box. Generally, this is my sentiment with this entire Netflix series. That's a shame because I felt more frustrated here than I did with the 2010 adaptation. I could at least see the potential of this being a good series. The Shyamalan adaptation was crap, and the only thing you could see in it was the snark value. This one, I felt like there was something that could work. We do see Iroh and Ozai interact, such as at Liu Ten's funeral and right before Zuko's banishment. We never saw Ozai and Iroh interact at all in the original series. We see the fact that Zuko being the only person there for Iroh at the funeral and staying by his side, leading to Iroh to follow Zuko into banishment, was really strong. These are scenes I like. The men being the very division Ozai was going to sacrifice, now being Zuko's crew, that's a good change, one that I can easily see being in the original series. Seeing Ozai play both his children against each other is a nice thing to see, because it adds depth to the depravity. And, well, the fact that he sees his children like bullets makes him a much more despicable character where you want to see Aang take his bending away very quickly. However, I feel like the series falls apart with the gang, which isn't good since these three are the main characters. For starters, there's a lot less personality for our animal sidekicks. While Momo does get some gags like carrying fruit with Sokka, the same could not be said for Appa. Appa as a whole lacks the personality he had in the original series. It's easier to do gags with a giant flying bison in the original animation because everything's animated, not so much in live action. As a whole, the humor had to be toned down heavily, which, okay, but then you run into some issues, mainly the dialogue. One example of this script being really clunky is when Chief Arnook says, "Welcome to our ice wall. It has withstood attacks for over a century." Like I said in my episode review, he really doesn't need to say anything like that. We know what walls do. Maybe he should be ordering people around because, he's a leader. Hey, order them around to be on the repair crews. Repair crew, you go here. You, be backup. You really don't need to change that much dialogue. Then there's the finale, which another example of this poorly laced exposition comes in, where Yue says Aang has given himself over to the ocean spirit, allowing it to channel to rage through him and access the power of the Avatar. Yeah? We can see that. Please, writers, stop shoving exposition in our faces every second line of dialogue. You're not letting any of this sit in, or sink in this case. You're not allowing us to see and enjoy what's going on before us, which is odd because in the original series, there was a long gap of silence, like 30 seconds, where we have the soundtrack and the animation do the heavy lifting. We don't get that here. Sometimes being quiet, having no dialogue, is the best dialogue option. Look, I hold that the first season of Avatar is the most difficult to adapt because this is the most episodic of the three seasons. You are trying to cram 20 episodes of episodic storytelling into 8 episodes of serialized storytelling. I doubt season 2 and 3 will have the same problem because they're a bit more serialized than the first season. With that said, there are some issues with how this series handles location and story progression that I find could use a lot more improvement. The series wants to sell us a world, but it's not doing the sensible thing of having us learn with the characters and immerse ourselves in the world. I think the first episode demonstrates this problem quite well. We open directly with Fire Lord Sozin, and we open with the Air Nomad genocide. If you're a person who watched the original series, you sort of just shrug off this change, or you don't like it because it's not the original series. But for a new audience, I don't think they're going to care much about you Order 66ing the Avatar's people. It baffles me that they just didn't do the boy in the iceberg stuff first, get us to know Aang, then have him enter the Avatar state while wandering through the corpses in the Southern Air Temple and through spirit mumbo jumbo, have him learn about what exactly transpired during the Air Nomad genocide. You could have it like a moment of psychometry where he just touches Gyato's corpse while trying to bury it, and then he just sees the flashback. I mean, that would work. Why didn't you do that? That would have made a lot stronger of an impression for both Aang and Zuko. For Aang, the audience learns this tragedy that happened to his people as he learns it. For Zuko, you see what he's fighting for, and you already don't like him from the fact that he attacked Wolf Cove. That's how you add depth. The main cast really should have been the through line for the plot itself. We learn about the world as they do. Sure, Aang could simply be knowledgeable about the world, but his information is 100 years out of date. When the show tries to get us to learn about the world as the characters do, it helps. This works out pretty well when you're using the main cast as the through line. Aang's desire to not be the last airbender, and holding out hope that there are more airbenders when he sees someone on a glider near Omashu, only to find out that Teo is not an airbender, was a strong moment. Speaking of third episode, let's talk about the other thing people complain about, including me: the compositing of multiple episodes from the original series. I get it. It's necessary. In the third episode alone, we do Omashu, the Mechanist, and Jet. However, this compositing of multiple episodes into one episode is not a problem. The problem is that you composited 3 different episodes, had 3 different setups, essentially, and you don't have 3 different satisfying payoffs. Jet, his plan fails and he gets deposed rather anticlimactically, being frozen to a cart. The Mechanist, after the fallout of the third episode, he's a coward who sells weapons to a Fire Nation. Sokka calls him out on it. His son calls him out on it. And now, the Mechanist has this golden opportunity to rat out the entire Fire Nation spy network in Omashu. We don't see him until the very end. No, no, no. We had to spend our time messing around in the Cave of Two Lovers. I swear, the plot threads that felt meaningful and complete were Iroh and Aang, mainly because these two were conclusions from the previous plot points that happened in the episodes prior. Iroh takes the blame for Aang and Zuko's duel at the end of the third episode in the market. Therefore, Zuko tries to sneak back to rescue him. However, the Earth Kingdom soldiers recognize the guy who besieged Ba Sing Se for 600 days and killed a hell of a lot of people, so they transfer him. Therefore, Zuko needs to play catch-up to Iroh's prison transport and break him out. Aang partook in the brawl, gets arrested, therefore he is brought before the king, and he's recognized as the king's old friend. However, the king sort of toys with Aang because King Bumi has lived through a century of war, became jaded and cynical, and wants to teach a lesson to Aang about the hard choices in war. These things, at least, feel cohesive. In terms of visuals, it's just okay. I'm fine with places like Agnikela. The spirit world is... ugh. Yeah, too much lens flare, too many filters. Honestly, you could have been a bit more creative with this. One of my stranger complaints is that I have an issue with the wildlife. I don't have an issue with the hybrid animals being rendered in CG. I really don't. What I have issue with is that anytime they're rendered in CG, they have to be the focus of a shot, which makes sense. CG animation is expensive. But you kind of lose out on the immersion of it all because you can't just really have like a flock of flying lemurs in the background anymore. You need to have them be in the focus of the shot, or else it's kind of a waste of CG on the economic side of it. And I get it, but honestly, I think it harms the immersion since we can't just see random hybrid animals everywhere. But that's just me. The bending needs some work. Okay, in the event that this gets a season 2, I have a few key requests. Number 1, focus on the characters. Focus on their interactions. You can have your A, B, and C plots all you want. The characters, however, should be the focus. Dedicate more of your dialogue to these character moments rather than the exposition dumps. This show is strongest when you have character moments and not long diatribes of exposition. Show or tell, but do not be absurdly redundant. I think that's why the Fire Nation scenes are the best part. I don't feel like I'm being read a script of an advertisement. Number 2, the fight scenes need a lot of work. The choreography of the fight scenes, the only time I feel like they're actually doing martial arts is firebending. It also feels like the punches and the kicks don't sync up with the actual special effects. I think it has the exact same problem as the Shyamalan adaptation. Ugh. There's a lot of movement at times, but that movement is not empty like the Shyamalan adaptation, but it is full. And, it feels unnecessary. Number 3 is sort of an addendum to number 2. The issue I have with this series is that the bending styles don't feel as unique, and you can't tell that they're inspired by what martial art. I don't know whether it's a byproduct of the fact that the movements are not syncing up with the bending itself, or if it's something else, but it feels like these fighting styles aren't distinct. Just because you do earthbending in a horse stance doesn't mean you're going through all the other stances of earthbending properly, if you know what I mean. And before anyone says you could only do that in animation, the problem is that the animation of The Legend of Korra and the original series made a ton of reference reels in order to help the animators out, some of which were flat out rotoscoped in order to do the fight scenes. It's possible to make this bending feel unique and real and stylized. If needed, possibly hire someone who has experience in wuxia media as a whole. But those are just my thoughts on the matter. Please consider liking, subscribing, tipping the channel on Ko-fi. This is Cyril signing off. I'm done.